Welcome back to our mini-series of Do Specs Differently. In this very first episode, we're going to cover the basics of what you need to put into your specifications. So here we go. So let's start out with the basics. What are the key things that you actually need inside of a specification? Well, of course, you need a list of your fields, messages, enumerations, and so on and so forth. And most people have cracked that bit. That bit's absolutely fine. The bit that people tend to get stuck on whenever they're doing development against an API, though, there are some common areas. The first is symbology. So everybody has a slightly different version. Is it you're asking people to send you a RIC? Are you asking people to send you an ISIN? Is it Bloomberg code? Is it your own custom proprietary code? What is it? Now, this is a reasonably straightforward section to write, but it is important that it's front and center right near the introduction so that everybody understands exactly which symbology you're planning on using. And this gets more and more important as you get into more exotic instruments. Equities are nice and simple. When we talk about off-exchange forwards or swaps or something like that, then it becomes far, far more difficult and far more important that you describe symbology up front. Second section actually is a nice simple section which is all about addressing. So when a customer connects to you to establish the fixed session, what is the address that they're sending? What's your target comp ID that they should be sending in? How should you know them back? Are there any sub-IDs that need to be put in, and so on and so forth? It's a nice simple section. You've probably got this already done. It's worthwhile just checking over because it is a common stumbling block. The next one is all about life cycle. So one of the big questions that people always have is, well, what happens if my session disconnects? A lot of exchanges nowadays, particularly the equities exchanges, have cancel on disconnect functionality, which means that if your session unexpectedly terminates or is broken for whatever reason, the session will automatically detect that and it will cancel outstanding orders to reduce your exposure. That's absolutely fine as a piece of functionality. The point is in your specification, you need to say whether that's on or off or whether that's optional in some way or shape or form. Similarly, other types of expiry are also important to really document well. So what happens overnight to orders? Do orders stay on your order book perhaps and continue to roll forward to another day? What happens if it's a derivatives instrument and we get past the contract date? What happens in those cases? So there's lots of different permutations there in terms of expiry, what happens overnight to orders, how they roll forward into the next section. Be sure to have a look at however you're describing those in your documentation today, and make sure that's good. Settlement is very closely related. So what is the settlement timeline for any contracts that are traded on your particular venue or through your services? Okay. It's very easy in systems like, or in asset classes like equities, where it's pretty well defined. FX, normally it's okay, but of course we get some FX pairs which are traded on a T+1 basis versus T+2 for the vast majority of them. Where is the time zone cutoff in terms of what T means, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of simple explanation that you need about how trades that you conclude through the session are actually going to be settled. Recently, there's also been an initiative called Market Model Topology, otherwise known as MMT. You can read about this a little bit more on the Fixed Trading Community website. MMT is really about the reporting of off-exchange transactions. And there's lots of flags that need to go into that reporting approach. If you are using MMT, if you're asking people to populate various different tags in either their messages, let's say their trade capture reports or something like that, then it's really important that you describe those in detail. There's a lot of permutations, a lot of complexity around MMT, and you need to be quite specific about it. I'd recommend probably its own section just on MMT and how you plan on implementing that. I'm not going to go into too much detail right here because MMT really is a very big topic, but it is something just to be aware of. Finally, in terms of getting the basics right, it's all about the level of knowledge that you assume that the reader actually has. All too often I see people get this level slightly wrong. They either assume too much knowledge and kind of don't really describe what the message says, or what fields it contains. They just kind of assume that people know it roughly, which actually leaves the less able vendors or firms struggling a little bit, and you're probably answering a lot of simple questions from them. or they just document too much. And you end up with a 100-page document, which nobody really wants to read. So getting the level right is really, really important. The key thing here is document things efficiently, which means don't keep repeating the same information again and again and again. So use things like components and references to various different other sections inside of your document to make sure you're not repeating things. But it's also to make sure that if people need more information, they know exactly where to go. So for example, if you say, I don't want to describe the session layer details, please go and see another document which describes exclusively the session layer details so that they can go and find that if they're not quite familiar with it. So those are the basics: symbology, addressing, cancel on disconnect, expiry, settlement, MMT, getting the level right. There's a lot of things there, but you can probably go through and tick off each one of those in turn and work out whether your specifications are up to scratch or not.
Okay, hope that helps. Next up, we're going to talk about putting message context, explaining message context. So see you in the next episode.